Welcome to Cut the Crop, keeping you in the know about everything you grow. Researchers, growers and other interesting folk delivering insights and information on topics ranging from agronomy to profitability. Brought to you by the Foundation for Arable Research.
Hello and welcome. My name's Alison Stewart and I'm going to be your host for this episode of Cut the Crop. And today we've got Owen Gibson from FAR and he's going to be talking about bird damage in arable crops. So welcome, Owen.
Thank you, Alison.
So let's start off by just talking about how big a problem birds are.
Birds are a huge problem and they always have been a problem. Studies done in 2008, we've seen talk of maybe $30 million of damage done to arable crops alone. One seed company suggests it could be just to them $3 million of damage. But they damaged a whole farm system. It's not just in seed where we're getting this damage. Are paying in sheds with farm machinery. They are bad at establishment. We can have ducks, pukekors. They pick up the seedlings. So it's right across the whole sector.
Yeah.
It's not just a problem for arable, it's a problem for viticulture, horticulture. They've got just as much problems as we do, or even more. So, yeah, it's been an ongoing problem.
So, obviously it's been a problem for a long time. People have been trying to control birds for a long time. So what are all the different ways in which people have been trying to manage bird problems?
Well, it's just the biggest product that has been used to control birds probably has been gas guns. We've put in paddocks, bangers, you'll hear them. You hear them, they have seed. When crops are maturing, they're going all day. But we've got problems with these. We've got complaints, especially around townships. But there's lots of different methods. Farm worker going around for shotgun, putting shots in the air. But once again, we've got to be careful where we're doing this. We've got streamers, balloons, bird kites. It's just endless. Recently in 2017, thereabouts, lasers came about. So we're putting lasers in field crops. That is putting a laser across the ground to scare off these birds. Janglers, a lot of research sites are using these jangler machines, which is a big wire with bells and cans and making a racket, but they're breaking down all the time. So we've got lots of instruments to control birds, but the problem is they don't all work. They work for a while, but then they'll stop working.
And that's because the birds get used to it.
Birds are smart.
Yeah.
Very smart. And it doesn't take long for them to know how to get around some of these products used to scare them. They'll learn if you don't change how the laser's going across the field, they'll learn what it's doing and they'll go in when it's on the far side of the field and they'll pick away. So, they know when the gas guns, they habituate to the sound and they know that this sound is not a direct threat to them. So they'll start moving into the crop closer and closer to these devices. So,
what you're basically saying then is that there's no one silver bullet for this. There's lots of technologies out there that I guess there's advantages and disadvantages of them all. How do growers manage to mix and match all of these to try and keep the level of control up?
Well, it's very difficult because, obviously some of these products cost a lot of money. A laser in itself, it's a big investment and it's by itself, it does do a very good job. But, if you invested in this one product, you don't want to be putting all this other money in other like gas guns, or you may have some of those on your farm anyway. But I think the biggest point is managing them correctly. You can't just set them up in a field and expect them to work from day one and continue working all the way through the season. There's methods to make them more productive and do a better job. So
is this the research that FAR has been doing?
It's the research that FAR's just started touching on now. And so we have had a trial this year in a paddock of sunflowers. Sunflower seed is very, very sought after by birds.
And hemp seed.
Hemp seed, radish, hybrid radish, cereals even. The cereals are really damaged by birds, but you have to decide where you want to put your money. Like, do you want to be protecting lower value crops, or do you want to put, really protect these high value crops? And I think that's where you're going to get the most out of using these devices.
So what have we been testing? Have we been doing like comparative tests of looking at the effectiveness of, 5 different methods, or are we looking at how to mix and match them?
We have, and that's what we tried to do in the sunflower. There's constraints on how we can do it. The sunflower trial we had was only a 7-hectare paddock, and you put 5 devices in 7-hectare paddock, that's pretty crowded, and it's not what would be done on the farm. So it was really good to have a look at the different products used in conjunction with each other and how they worked in a small scale around themselves. But I think going forward, we're going to have to move these type of trials out into bigger paddocks, bigger field scenarios to see the true effect of each of these products working.
So I'm interested in the lasers because, I have been out last year and I did look at how some of the growers have been using them, and they do look like as if they're working, but I'm guessing surely we should have a sophisticated enough sort of programming system to try different colours or different wavelengths and different timings and different pulses. Is that the kind of technology that we're going towards?
Yes, it is. And lasers work really well, and that has been done. We know that if you'll see pretty much most lasers you'll see in a paddock will be green.
Yeah.
And we know that green colour spectrum works best for birds. But we can change what we're doing. There has been talk about going in the future with lasers of running green and red lasers to try to stop that habituation of birds to just one fret level. So, but there's a lot of extra things, and the biggest comeback from our working group that we've just set up recently was that, and this is across everyone who's using them, is that you have to get in early. And I think that's the key point for any of these bird scaring devices, is get in early before the birds have started feeding on the seed or the crops. If you don't, you're really just taking a backward step. So you need to get in early. And then also, it's not just about shining lasers, if we're talking about lasers on the field. We need to be taking that through the resting places.
Okay, like hedgerows.
Hedgerows, yep. And because birds, and we know that these birds work on a triangle of going between resting places, water, and food sources. And this is this triangle that they use. So we have to disrupt this natural rhythm of these birds. So if we can start early, get the laser going through the trees bright and early in the morning, that is a good start of trying to disrupt these natural patterns of the birds coming into the crops.
So you talked about, I guess some of the issues with gas guns and shotguns, and near rural areas, but surely there are some issues that people are going to have around lasers flying around all over the place. Are people driving along, roads next to paddocks, are they going to be distracted by, these lasers?
There have been some complaints, but usually the only reason there's been complaints is because they're not set up right. Okay. So it comes down to setting up the lasers properly to start with. So you need to know where these areas are, and you have to be careful with roads. Obviously, you can't have a laser shining on a road, but also there are protective measures in place. They've got light switches on them so that they won't run at night. They're built so they can't go above horizontal, so the laser can't be shining up into the sky. So obviously we have to be very careful with the aviation industry with lasers, and everyone's heard about that. So there are methods in place already to stop, any unwanted beams going where they shouldn't. But it's just being aware of when setting them up, of how best to do it, and of the areas you have to be careful about.
Can you set up the lasers on drones and use drones as a mechanism?
There's been talking about drones, and everyone would love to see drones used for bird protection, of crop protection.
Yeah.
But at the moment, the Civil Aviation Authority, there's no way that we can have unmanned vehicles flying anywhere in the sky.
Yeah.
If we're operating drones, we have to be in sight of the drone at all times, and we have to be in control of the drone at all times. So talking to industry groups who are trying to use some of these products, and some have used drones in the past, and trying to work with that to see if it will work. And they do a good job, but they predict that we're at least 4 years away of really even getting the conversation started of allowing these regulations to change if we're going to use that. So
okay. So tell me about this working group that you mentioned. What exactly is this group and what's it trying to achieve?
So we haven't done a lot of work on this, even it's a huge problem with this bird predation of the seeds. And when we're looking back, there hasn't been a lot of research done on it. And we thought a really good first start was to get all the different groups together and start talking, have a conversation. What have growers been using in the fields to get the best results out of these products? What are the seed reps doing? What have the seed representatives seen in the fields? What have they seen that works best? So that was our initial thought, was get these people together in a room and have a conversation. So that's where we're trying to move with this. And we've only had one meeting so far, but the results have been good. And what was really surprising was talking to everyone was that everyone has got the same theme of using these devices, especially lasers, was you have to start early. You have to utilise them to use on shelter belts and the resting areas, not just on the crop. And you have to change the pattern, the pattern around the field, because they will habituate to the pattern if you just set it up and leave it. So if you can move the lasers, but that's kind of time consuming. You could risk damaging them the more times you move them. But even just changing the waypoints for the laser beam of how it's going around a paddock makes a big difference on the control you get.
So what about, the good old-fashioned nets? Are they still going to be part of the package, or are they? Is that an old technology that's just too difficult to manage?
The nets have definitely got a place, and we're never going to see them disappear. If you've got a paddock under 5 hectares, I think that netting is your best choice, because with these small areas, you just can't protect them. There's just not enough seed there to the birds have to feed somewhere.
Yeah.
You can try all you want. So netting's definitely got its place. It's very expensive.
I know, and birds, when they decide they want some food, they can make holes in those bloody nets and get in there.
They'll find any hole in it, and they'll get in there and start feeding. But I think with netting, it's got a place, but if people are finding that it's too time consuming, it's costly. It does create its own problems. It does, create its own damage. We have to put these nets on and off for crops. That's damaging the crops in itself. Yeah.
And then what do you do with all the netting when, it's got its use by date, it's bulky. And trying to get rid of it. Most of them aren't recyclable, and it is a bit of a nightmare. Are lasers, I guess, our best options, or is there anything else coming out of the technology space that's even just in a prototype?
There's work being done with sound beams, so kind of like a laser but with sound.
Yeah. And
that can move around in very early stages of production. So there is a lot of research is going into this. People are working on it, and drones, we talked about it. It doesn't look like they're coming, but people are still going to be working on them and seeing if we can make those work. But really what we have at the minute is what we're going to have to protect our crops for the near future anyway.
Yeah.
So we have to manage what we have. So, and netting can be part of a package, but it is, I mentioned, it's costly. We're talking $1,200 a hectare
Yeah.
But in a small area, that it kind of does pay for itself.
And I guess if you're in the viticulture space and you're making good gross margins, then it's fine. But maybe in an arable crop, it might not necessarily be cost effective. So how's far getting, sort of advice and guidance out to growers about what options there are and which ones work best under what circumstance? Are we doing extension work, or have we produced fact sheets? I mean, what are our plans to just inform the growers?
Well, I think they are our next steps, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to work up with, know exactly what is working, and how it's working compared to the different products, so that we can actually give out an informed decision. So we're doing a talk at the conference. I'm going to be presenting on what we've come up with the work group, and also some trial work we undertook this season. And we'll continue talking to the different groups, and we'll continue giving out what we come up with.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay, great. Thank you very much, Owen.
Thanks, Alison.
Yeah, and thank you, listeners. Have a great day on the farm.
Thanks for tuning in to Cut the Crop, presented to you by FAR. If you'd like to know more about any of the topics discussed or have any suggestions for future topics, go to www.cutthecrop.co.nz.